You wouldn't build a skyscraper without serving the foundation first. But that's exactly what companies are doing when they plug in AI without auditing their process first. No audit means no accountability, no shared logic, no maps for what happens when things go sideways. Welcome to Process of Elimination. I'm Justin L. Brown.
I'm Ryan Edwards.
And today we're getting into why the next 6 months will separate the AI fluent from the AI frustrated. And it comes down to one word: audit.
Yeah, and the word audit gets a bad rap. And it's probably one of the most important and powerful words and concepts when dealing with AI. Everybody hears audit and they think, audit, IRS. Audit, it's really bad. Audit, it's this big thing, a lot of work. And that's the absolute wrong way to look at audits. Audits are not meant to be big things. Audits are meant to be small things. And we were discussing earlier before we started filming this about flywheels. Audits are the key to the AI flywheel of growth.
Yeah, that's a great point, because whenever I think of audit, I automatically think of the IRS. And even when it comes to my workflows, I know for my personal SOP and my personal flows that I'm working on, there's a bit of auditing that goes on. But when it comes to a company or a enterprise level audit, that kind of is scary on a lot of ways, because you're thinking that you might be audited out. But in this case, what you're doing is a true definition of like a postmortem, where you looked at the last project and then you found out that there was things that could have been done better, but an actual, like, without the ego that goes into it.
Right. Yeah. The purpose of the audit isn't to look at what happened. The purpose is not necessarily to look backwards, is to use what's happened to help better your future. The purpose of an audit is to move you forward. And if you do audits in small increments, you almost don't realize you're doing it. They're more of just discussions. Hey, here's what we did. How can we do this better next? That's all an audit really is.
What are some clear signs that a company skipped the audit process? Like, have you seen any indicators out there that's like, I can tell that you guys are kind of just going with this legacy workflow and are kind of doing the same thing over and over again? Have you seen anything like that?
The clear sign, and I see this all the time, is 2 words. Why? Because. Simple as that. People are doing things just because. Why? Because we've always done it that way. Why? Because it worked great for us 2 years ago. Guess what? 2 years ago and yesterday are 2 very different time periods. And that's what the audit is there for. It's there to make those. Sometimes the biggest change comes from the smallest adjustments. And how do you find those smallest adjustments? You find those smallest adjustments by doing audits. That's why when we work with somebody, the first thing we do is understand the workflows. The second thing we do is understand the points of which it's possible to make an impact and change the workflow for the better. And the third thing that we do is then perform, I'm going to call them a micro-audit on those smaller points. Because like we said, doing those micro-audits on those smaller points can make the biggest changes.
That's perfect. When you say it like that, it actually sounds a lot less daunting to wait until the end. It's like you got friends coming over and then all of a sudden you got to spend 4 hours cleaning the house, as opposed to keeping it somewhat clean so you just can hit the heavy traffic areas.
Yeah. Like you said, you got your friends coming over, you got to cook your meal, you got to plan your playlist, you have all these things to do. The last thing you want to do is spend your time on the small stuff. But the small stuff makes all the difference. That's what your friends will see. That's what they'll comment on. That's what they'll go and talk to you about behind your back. So if you're doing those small things throughout the week incrementally and getting that better, then when it comes showtime, all you got to focus on is the big picture, because you did your little audits. You did all those little items all throughout the week.
The other scary thing I find in the work environment as far as auditing is if there is a question that arises from that audit, I have yet to be in an environment with 5 or more people where an ego might come into play, like, well, this is what I've done. This is how it's always been. And it's never an attack on your ego. It is just simply looking at the process and seeing if there is a way that it could have been a little bit smoother, a little bit more efficient for the next time you go around. And the ones that do that well are the ones who are highly successful. But if you're feeling like this is the way and the only way, then that process might become a little more stale, and then it's going to be harder to implement new and exciting opportunities for potentially a new AI module, or just understanding that some of that process could be a little more efficient.
Audits in the age, because we're not in the age of AI, we're in the age of AI adoption. And audits in the age, gosh, that's hard to say. Audits in the age of AI adoption, are really important. And one thing you touched on is if you have a team, let's say you have a team of 4 people or 5 people, and you're doing these micro audits, it is really easy for people to get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the tricks that we found for that is bring in somebody from the outside. Bring in an outside person to the company, or simply bring in somebody outside to your team in the company, because that gives you 2 things. It gives you a different perspective, and it also takes away that ego, because now you have people not saying, why do we do it this way in an accusing way? You have people saying, why do we do it this way? Because they're being exposed to your thinking for the first time. And now you're explaining to the person. And that's what really an audit is by explaining by explaining to somebody why you do it, you're now bringing up those points of questions. We did it this way because we've always done it this way, because we had this flow because of this reasons. Oh, that's really interesting. And now with AI, can we change this one element? That's the advantage of doing an audit with an outside source.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but audit obviously scares people because they're thinking of, binders and charts and all the boring things that go along with an audit. How do you define the modern audit in an AI native team?
That's a good question. An audit in a modern AI native team is the one word that comes to mind is incremental. You're not looking to try to figure out how to do everything different. And you're not looking how to do everything better. And you're not even looking at how to do everything the most efficient. Because here's the crazy thing. Sometimes you can be too efficient, because efficiency can hurt the outcome. So that's what you want to look for in your audit. That's why you want to do your audits incrementally at stages, so you can see how it fits in, how you can get those little wins. And that way you can also see how the audit affects each individual person in the team. And then you do the broader audit that looks at how it affects the entire team. And then you do a broader audit on how it affects the entire outcome and the company. And that's part of the key. And that also gets rid of what we talked about early on as the ego. If you do one audit at the team level, or the personal level, it's quick and easy. It's a discussion. How can we do this better? How can we do AI? And it gives that person, here's the thing, an audit is a 2-way street. It gives that person the opportunity to give input and say, here's how I think we can be more efficient with AI and without AI. And that's the important part of an audit, is creating that 2-way street.
You make a great point with the 2-way street, because when we talk about auditing, when we think of, marketing, there's a postmortem where you have your managers come in and sit down and actually look at the process from beginning to end on the project that you just finished. And someone under that management might feel like you have to justify all the decisions that were made leading up to that point. Being that it's a 2-way street, especially because you should be auditing during that process, it's something where the employees or the person who's actually executing is giving feedback to the manager on, this is the things that you asked me to do. These are the ways that I end up doing those things. And here is some inefficiencies that I found in this process of at every single stage. And then that way your postmortem will be a lot more efficient, a lot more intuitive, have a lot more tangible information inside of that because you had those check-ins at each stage. And by doing that, now your management, maybe even upper management, and the workflow will go both ways, or the communication will go both ways, so everybody's on the same page along the process.
Right. I was at a dinner a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a guy who is in charge of a retail brand. He does all the marketing for a large retail brand. And he was telling me the story about how he hired a consultancy to come in and do an audit. And yeah, they came in and they did an incredible audit, all these diagrams, all these flows, all these great points, but it took them 7 months to do the audit. And by the time the audit was done, it was irrelevant because it took them 7 months. And yeah, that was great 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Today, 7 months is 3 or 4 generations. That's also why, like you were saying, it's good to do these things quickly. It's good to do these things. Sometimes an audit can be a little bit messy. You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have the great, grandiose flow diagram of the audit with all these things. Just do it quick, do it easy, and do it in a way that the team understands.
That slow down, get it perfect process is not the case anymore. People aren't resonating with that. You can look at what's happening with Apple and Siri and how they were really good at making sure to wait until they got things perfect to put things out. Now you want to make sure that you're checking in, and then, I've worked with so many companies that use that. We're building the plane as it takes off. Well, to make sure that plane is actually flying, you will have to have check-ins. You will have to understand the process and the work and the flow of work, both directions. So that's a great point. When it comes to being able to do that a little bit more efficiently, as a team, it's a twofold question. As a team, how do you make sure that your check-ins aren't something that's bogging the process down and it's efficient? And then when you bring a consultant like yourself in Camino 5's team, what does that process look like?
I mean, the first question is, how do you make sure you don't bog the team down? Again, I sound like a broken record right now, but you don't want to make it big. You don't want to make it grandiose. You want to look at it from the perspective of the person, the team, the company, and the outcome. And that way you can bring the right people in at the right time, and they have the right perspective. And one of the important things when working with a team on an audit, particularly a team of people with different levels, and bringing in new technology, and possibly teams that have been using shadow AI, is using the audit to create that safe space for discussion.
So my next question after that, you answered the first question really well. Well, my next question actually kind of goes into our ideology drop. You broke it down into having bite-sized pieces that people can actually take home and start that process. So when a team like yourself from Camino 5 comes in, it has a baseline to really make sure that everybody as an individual is prepared for the consultant to come in and have a little bit more of a harder hitting questions. But we've already developed 5 questions that you as the audience could take home and start yourself. So that way that process will be a little bit smoother when you go into those bite-sized bits of auditing your processes. You ready for it?
Ready for it.
All right. So here are our 5 questions. Is the workflow visible or is it tribal? Are the handcuffs clean or are they noisy? Is the thinking modular or messy? Do the outputs match your voice or does it break it? And the last question we have is feedback built in or is it bolted in?
Just one quick note to everybody out there. You don't have to, worry about writing this down right now. You can look in and we'll have this as a downloadable for you.
We will absolutely give you something to download because this one's a little deeper than the last few. So tackling the first question, is the workflow visible or is it tribal? And I know for me, this visible or tribal is kind of calling back to that shadow AI methodology we were talking about. Is the workflow something that me as an individual own and I know how to operate it, or is it something that the team has access to?
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the funny things is that at a team level, let's say you have a team of 5, which is a normal team size, you is a small team size, you need to be both individual and team oriented at the same time. And that requires an SOP that can work, that has enough flexibility for the person to put their own personal workflow, how they like to do it, into it, but also is rigid enough that everybody knows what's going on and anybody can understand how the outcome was created and can pick it up.
And then the next question is, are the handcuffs clean or noisy? Which is like who owns what, what's needed for the next step. Let's talk about that.
Handcuffs are great because handcuffs create boundaries, and boundaries are good. And here's why. You create a box with SOPs. Well, you create a series of nested boxes that allows people to do whatever they want in a box. But you have that box there to make sure that it doesn't explode the larger process. And why I said nested boxes is, if you think about a person who does whatever they want in the smaller box and that fits in, then that fits into the larger box. Then they can do whatever they want in that box. And you see how it is a growing cycle. And each one of those nested boxes is an opportunity for an audit.
One of my favorite quotes that I say whenever I'm inundated with a little too much work is, I could do anything, but I can't do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And to task an individual with a task, but there is no boundaries, nothing to actually, no walls to know that when you're out of bounds, that's a very difficult place to be in, because then you can get stuck in the minutia. So that goes to our next question. Is the thinking modular or is it messy? And this is a question that people should be asking themselves, mainly because if it's modular, then like you said with the boxes, the box analogy is like you go from one and then you get to the bigger one, or is it messy? Is it just boxes scattered all over the place and you got to find out which one you should be playing in?
My daughter is moving this weekend. She got her own apartment.
Congratulations.
Yes, and she's moving out. And so what she's doing today, and this is probably why boxes are on my mind, she's going out there and she's buying a bunch of boxes. Now, here's what she's going to do. She's going to dump a whole bunch of crap into the box, but then she's going to label the box and know what's in each box and have it organized so she can put the box in the room. And that's how we look at the audits. You can be as messy as you want in that box, but the box is the container. It's labeled. The next person knows how to pick up the box. They know what's in it, and they know what to do with it. So boxes are your opportunity to be messy.
I resonate with that so well. First of all, congratulations to your daughter. The smile that he gave is because he's proud of you, not because you're finally moving out the house and you'll have a little bit more space. So that was that smile.
It's definitely not because you move out on Monday and by Tuesday that your bedroom will now be our office.
Ooh. Yeah, that was a great breakdown of modular versus messy, which brings us to the fourth question. Do your outputs match your voice or break it? And that really just comes from your POV, from your format and tone. How do people audit their voices to make sure that their voices is consistent with the brand or messaging that they're looking to push out?
I mean, that's just what you're talking about now is just a function of clarity. Clarity in brand voice, clarity in team function, and clarity in how you see yourself fitting into the structure of the company. And clarity is a direct product of company culture. And what you do in an audit is the purpose of one of these of an audit isn't to change company culture. The purpose for an audit is to allow people to, particularly an incremental audit or these small audits, is to allow people to ask questions and understand how they fit into it, and understand, has it changed? Or understand, are they thinking about it? Or is there a new input that they're seeing that they're not clear on? For example, a lot of people are really unclear on how AI fits into their company culture and how to use AI to get to that right voice. And these incremental audits is that opportunity, and they create that discussion. Culture is a direct outcome of discussion, and clarity is a direct outcome of culture.
That should be like a haiku people should put above their doors, just to give a full reminder. I like what you just said.
We should do a podcast just on haikus.
That would require a lot of memorization, I feel like, and a lot of writing. But we could probably build a workflow to make that happen.
Here's a really fun fact that probably get edited out, but it's a really fun fact. 3 years ago, we went to a AI poetry reading done by a person who was working at OpenAI, who was in charge, who was a key person in training the models, and also had a master's degree in poetry. And the reason why was because they were using heavily poetry to train AI at the time.
Huh.
Understanding the context of poetry means you understand the context of the language.
A master's in poetry. I didn't know that was something. I didn't know that was something you can get a master's in.
Get a master's in anything.
And then he's working at OpenAI. That's an incredible journey.
Yeah, that's like 3 years ago, a AI poetry reading that we went to.
That's cool that she was able to pull that off. So that's a great breakdown of how to make sure that your voice is matched and, all the things that you were speaking on there. And it really goes into our final question, which is feedback built in or bolted on? And built in it's inside of the system. It's pretty close to the motherboard. It's all worked in there, as opposed to bolted on where it's attached later, like it's a third party system. And what are your thoughts on how? I have my thoughts where I would love anything that's built in is going to be a little bit more efficient because it was thought of at inception. But then bolting it on is something we've been talking about over the past few podcasts, which is kind of attaching new concepts to legacy systems. So what are your thoughts on that?
To me, it's not an either or. You have to have both.
Okay.
As you said, it has to be built in. It has to be part of it. It has to, because that allows for rapid iteration. That allows for teams to, have ownership and make changes and to see things. And that allows for innovation. So it has to be built in, but it also has to be bolted on because you need to have those larger times to step back and look at it objectively from the outside and say, hey, here's the changes that we could have made. Here's outside factors that the team's not seeing that could be affecting it. And how do we make changes? How do we incorporate? Or how do we don't need to? So it's not an either or. You have to do both. The question is just knowing when and how to do which.
That is a great point. And thank you for changing my mind on that, because in my mind, how I presented it before was it really does, you want to do your best to get it built in, but that what you just explained actually goes back to our last episode where through execution, you move into acceleration, and part of that acceleration process might be bolting on a new system, bolting on a new process, or just a simple new step. And once that step is bolted on, you can do some insight on it. And then all of a sudden it goes from bolted on to built in. It's not about the tools. It's about a system that knows what it's doing, why it's doing it, and how to check itself as it grows. Audit before agents, audit before automating. So here's the move for this week. Pick one campaign or process, just one. Walk through it with the outsider. Find out where the assumptions are, where the gaps are, and where the opportunities to slot in AI with intention.
So where to start? Start at the beginning. You don't have to start with a huge playbook. Start with an audit. Start with something simple. And that's what we do at Camino 5. We can help you with that. We just don't do the big playbooks. We help you with those audits. We help you get started. It doesn't have to be complex because we're here to help you scale.
Next week, we're going to talk about AI overcorrection, how to avoid making your brand voice turn into brand noise. Because speed means nothing if it doesn't sound like you. Until next time, thank you for watching Process of Elimination.